venerable newspapers in the country, thought the article accorded with the tradition of Indian secularism, and they reprinted it. And just afterwards, 3,000 Islamic fundamentalists rioted outside their offices, calling for me, the editor and the publisher, to be arrested or killed. One of the... believe me, it puts a Twitter hashtag in context. One of the rioters was quoted at the time saying, a guy called Abdus Subhan, who said he was prepared to lay down his life if necessary to protect the honour of the Prophet, and that I should be sent to hell. And 2 days later, the editor and the publisher were in fact arrested, and they were charged in the world's largest democracy with a constitution that supposedly guarantees the right to free speech for upsetting community feeling. And I was told if I went to Calcutta, I would be arrested. And when it happened, you know, just like, it's hard to know how to react to these things. And I thought, what do you do if you're a defender of free speech in this position? I believe the right to criticise religion and follow the facts wherever they lead us is one of the most precious rights we can have. So the people who said to me, apologise, I thought, I can't do that. And it's worth just touching on the arguments put forward by the rioting fundamentalists, because we're going to keep hearing them in this century. As secularism is assaulted again and again. They said I had upset the harmony of India, and it could only be restored by the silencing of these words. But it's a really interesting model of harmony that religious fundamentalists put forward. It means they're free to say whatever they want, and the rest of us have to shut up and agree. Well, that doesn't sound very harmonious to me. Now, the protesters said... The protesters said that I deliberately set out to offend them. And I'm supposed to reply by saying, no, I didn't want to offend anyone, no offence was intended. But the reality is more complicated. Offending fundamentalists is not my goal. But if it's an inevitable side effect of opposing their ridiculous ideas, well, fine, so be it. You know, if fanatics who believe that women should be imprisoned in their homes and gay people should be killed are insulted by me arguing back, I don't resile from it. Nothing worth saying is inoffensive to everyone. Nothing worth saying will fail to make you enemies, and nothing worth saying will not produce a confrontation. No one in this room has a right to be ring-fenced from offence. Every day I'm offended, not least by ancient religious texts filled with hate speech about people like me. Now, a lot more trivially, a lot of people have said a lot of offensive things about me in the past week, but I'm glad because I know the price of taking offence is that I can give offence, if that's where the facts lead me. It's a two-way street. We can scream and shout at each other. What we can't do is try to stop the game and say, no, I can say what I want, you can't say what you want. And these events are also, I think, a reminder of why it's so important to try to let the oxygen of rationality into religious debates and introduce doubt. Voltaire, who was one of the great anti-clericalists, said, those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. If you can be made to believe the absurd notion that an invisible deity dictated an eternal, unchanging truth to a specific person at a specific time in history, and he knows what kind of sex he wants you to have, he doesn't want you to eat a ham sandwich, you know, and anyone who disagrees is evil, you can easily be made to demand ludicrous things like the death of journalists and free women and gay people who question that truth. But if you introduce just a moment of doubt, if they know there's another argument, if there's a nagging question at the back of their minds, then they're more likely to hesitate. And that's why these ideas have to be challenged at their core using reason. Now, if after the discussion and all the facts about how contradictory and periodically vile their holy texts are, religious people still choose literal faith, I passionately defend their right to make their case. Free speech is for people who are wrong and people who are right. It's for hate-wielders being a bigot about Muslims. It's for Muslims being a bigot about gay people. It's for all of us. Fine, make the argument. If you disagree, if you don't like what someone says, argue back. Make a better case. Persuade people. Get it right. Do it better. The best way to discredit a bad argument is to let people hear it. And just as a couple of final thoughts, you know, if I look around this room and I try to imagine what the lives of all of us here would be like if amazing people before us, people, you know, brave people had not pushed at the limits of what religious people said we could do and say. You know, the women, well, the women wouldn't be sitting among the men. If any of you women are menstruating, get out. You know, If anyone here has masturbated, I'm not looking at anyone, you'd be dead. If anyone here was gay, you'd be dead. If you committed adultery, you'd be dead. You know, it is precisely the mechanism of free speech. If I think about my grandmother's lives, both my grandmothers died recently. I think about the lives they led. You know, they both had to leave school when they were 14. They were clever women who had such frustrated lives where they were, you know, treated badly. You know, one of them lived in the Swiss mountains, which is pretty reactionary. And, you know, it was because people were free to argue and say, don't treat women like that. You know, there was Gay Pride last Saturday. I spoke to someone a couple of years ago who said he was at one of the first Gay Prides in the early 60s in Trafalgar Square. 26 people turned up and they were all arrested and beaten by the police. And if you had stood in Trafalgar Square on that day and you had said, and you had told those 26 people, use your right to peacefully persuade people. You're not going to threaten anyone. You're not going to have any violence. And 60 years from now, they're going to shut down central London for this. And there will be hundreds of thousands of straight people there. And the people who think you're disgusting, they'll be the ones regarded as the freaks. And there'll be gay married couples, and there'll be members of the government who are gay. It would have seemed like the most ludicrous utopia. But it happened because of free speech, and because people could peacefully try and persuade each other, and because people fought for secularism. And you can see the value of that secularism if you compare my very minor experience in 2009 when I got these threats to that of journalists living under these religious fundamentalist regimes. Because generations of British people fought to create a secular space. When I went to the police, they offered me total protection. When those people go to the police, they're handed over to the fanatics, or they're charged for their crimes, or the police are the ones who come for them. They're people like Syed Pervez Kambash, the young Afghan journalism student who was sentenced to death for downloading a report on women's rights. There are 1,000 reasons why I am so proud to work for The Independent, but the biggest is that we campaigned for him, and he did not get executed because of that. And this model of criticism and rational dispute needs to be applied to all forms of power, to politicians, to the religious, to corporations, and yes, to the journalists like me who give you speeches about the need to dispute everything. The more we're all monitoring each other and arguing about it freely and speaking our minds and exposing wrongdoing whenever it occurs, the more we'll all get it right. Thank you.